And this means freedom, self-awareness, expression. And this to me means you can be more than one thing. I'm Jasmene Bowdry, and you're listening to And This Podcast.
I always tell people I didn't create HBCUs. I didn't discover them. Right. I just served the audience that was being underrepresented. And I realized that because when I would see somebody in the airport with my hoodie on and they didn't know I was the owner, I'd be like, oh, where'd you get that hoodie from? Oh, this company called Support Black Colleges. And they'll start doing all of this, like telling me about my brand. And I'm like, oh, they really champion it like it's theirs. And I realized that it was more than about just wearing hoodies. I realized that it was more than just about the clothes. And the difference between some brands and others is what your community looks like. Because anybody can have a clothing brand, but like, how are you impacting people? How does it feel when you put it on? Like, the greatest compliment to me is when somebody talks about my brand like it's theirs. That is like the greatest compliment because it feels like I'm really doing something. Like I remember like heat pressing and sewing it and I shipped it, but I never saw where it went. You got it and now you're posting it and you like, oh my, I'm repping my HBCU. So I realized there was another play there. And then also I remember my first time a company reached out to promote with our page. They're like, oh, we want to promote this event on Support by Colleges. And they were offering thousands of dollars. And I'm like, wait, I got to sell 200 hoodies to get this money. But you just say, oh, send an email out or post on a page and we get this. I realized that there was a bigger play there. So not only are we building the community, but we can utilize the community to help other people build their events and whatever they want to promote. One mistake I made was instead of hiring, I said, be my 50-50 partner. I learned that lesson. So I can now moving forward in my next business, I can say, I can just hire. If I'm not good at ads, let me just hire somebody to do ads. Yep. You don't have to own my business. Oh, I'm not good at this. I can have some manufacturing. Let me just hire a company that does manufacturing. And I think so many times we have this entitlement based off of our perception of things. It's not that I don't want to help. If you want help, I have programs, I have courses. You can book a call. You don't want to do those things. Nope. You want to go half of me on something that I don't need help with because you're not going to do half the work. I'm going to carry the load. And so I think it's really important. And it's in our community too. Like we be the worst ones. And it's like sad because you can go to like any city or any state and there's like a Chinatown and there's like where all the Jewish people are. And there's the black community, we call them hoods and we don't own none of that property. Yep. But you go to Chinatown in DC, you can go to Chinatown in New York, you can go to Chinatown in LA and they like all working together as a unit. Yep. But for us, it's like we fighting each other within our own communities that we don't even own. And our businesses are getting shut down because you have one bad experience. And now you're all over Yelp and TikTok saying how bad it was. When you
That's
why
I don't support Black-owned brands.
That's why I don't support them. And you didn't know that the person's family member died yesterday and they still show up to work because they didn't have no choice because nobody else would work. And we have to extend grace to each other. Like, please, like, now it's one thing if you're doing over and over, but just extend a little bit of grace because at the end of the day, we're all doing this for the first time. Most of us, like, I'm a first generation entrepreneur. Like, I have never had high level examples of people doing what I'm doing. And I'm creating this pathway that I didn't even know it really existed until I started doing it. And so I'm learning every day. Every day is something new for me. So I think just grace is really important in this process.
I remember those early stages when we launched the journals, the 4 journals. It was all about trying to get an order a day. Like, to be honest, that was my original goal. And then once we got past that, we got a lot of really amazing press early on. And we had a hard time staying in stock. And so we kept ordering like what was my MOQ at my domestic manufacturer. And then we sell out. And then I had to get back in stock and then we would sell out. And then because of that press, we got on the radar of 3 different retailers that were interested in supporting Black-owned brands. And because I had a background in retail, I knew that going to retail wasn't easy. And so as many people that I know often are just happy to have the conversation with a retailer, like I was honestly interviewing them because the worst thing for me, as we talked about, was that you can get a brand in retail, but staying in retail is by far the hardest thing. And at a brand of my size, I think I had like under 500 Instagram followers. Like I think I was making like less than like, $5,000 in sales a month at that time. Like super, super, super small brand at this time. I wanted to make sure that I was with a retail partner that would truly be a partner because as most people will say, it's up to you to drive your customer
Right.
to retail.
Yep.
But I ain't have that many customers, not to be driving to like
Right.
that level, right? And so
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that if I got to retail, it would be with someone that was on this for a journey
Yep.
and not somebody that was just looking to check a box and say that they supported a Black-owned brand. What I found most in my career is when I got to work with Black and brown entrepreneurs, when I was working at Target building up the multicultural segment, I found the most passion when I've been able to work in the Black community and do work that's centered around Black women specifically. And so I felt completely comfortable with starting a brand that I knew that even if it maybe didn't live up to other people's expectations, at the end of the day, it'd be doing the work that I felt most passionate about. And so I think that like when you know your why and you know why you're doing something, no, regardless what the outcomes are, you're able to get up every day and be like super excited about it because you know that you're focused on what you should be doing, what you're put on earth to do. The second thing, more practically, is that when we were expanding, there was a couple of times when we got things wrong. So for Black History Month a couple of years ago, we did these really cute wood trays, and I was so super excited about having wood trays that you could put like in your living room, and it had a beautiful imagery of a Black woman in the bottom of it. Girl, why they show up the shelf half broken?
Oh,
I worked with a supplier that really kind of sold me a dream on what their capabilities were. I also underestimated your products moving throughout the supply chain in mass retail.
Yeah.
When things were shipped to my warehouse to be shipped on DTC, they were fine.
Yep.
But when you're shipping to mass retail, it got on a boat, it got put to a DC, it got sent to a store, it got thrown in a cart, and then once it got thrown in the cart, it got put on a shelf. Now it got thrown back in another customer's cart. And so we took a fair amount of damages on that product type. And, you know, it was a lesson for me and how I vet suppliers. It was a lesson for me to think through what does testing look like. And so as an entrepreneur, I feel like you're going to fall down, like, if not daily, at least weekly and make a mistake. But I feel like at the end of the day, like these lessons that I'm learning are building me for something greater.
But before I talk about how you get your products on shelves, I want you to ask yourself a few questions to really determine and do a self-assessment on if your business is ready for big box. First question is, can you fulfill a purchase order on time? Meaning, after you've had a conversation with a retail buyer, which typically goes through a process that's called a line review. And this is where they are evaluating, they're meeting with you, they're talking numbers, and they're making a decision on if your product is going to go onto their shelves. Then you actually have to fulfill your commitment. And so when they send that purchase order, can you fulfill it on time? Meaning if Target successfully accepts you after their line review and they say, hey, now I want 50,000 units of your product and we need it by X amount of time, can you send that to them on time? Because what happens if you're late comes with a hefty fine. Not only that, you are risking your chances to stay on shelves because we don't just want to get on retail shelves. We want to actually stay on retail shelves. So the first question you need to ask yourself is, can I fulfill a big purchase order in a timely manner? Another question I want you to ask yourself is if your current business cash flow allows for you to operate and sustain for the next 3, 6, or 9 months. So how much money, what is your run rate? How much money do you have that is going to allow your business to continue to operate successfully for the next 3, 6, or 9 months? And you might be wondering, why does she care about our cash flow? She's not an accountant. No, I am not. However, when it comes to your cash flow and going into retail, you are not going to get paid from a retail company immediately. They have terms that are going to be negotiated within the contract, and some of them are pretty strict and you are not able to change. And typically those are the payment terms, which is net 60 at a minimum, if you're lucky. But typically it's going to be around net 90 and sometimes net 180. This means that either after the purchase order is placed or after the purchase order is fulfilled, meaning that you have now shipped your products and they have successfully arrived to that retailer's distribution center, now they will pay you after 90 days or after 180 days. It really depends on the contract and what's in the agreement in the terms of when they're actually going to pay you. If it's going to be once the 90 days from when the purchase order is placed, or 90 days after it hits their actual distribution center. Typically, it's 90 days after it hits their distribution center because they want to make sure that you actually have shipped and fulfilled the product. So think about that. If you don't get this $500,000 PO, this $50,000 PO, this $1 million PO, can your business sustain? Or is it going to tank you because now you've taken everything you've had in order to actually fulfill this purchase order to get into retail? So that is why understanding your cash flow is important. Next, you want to think about, does your price point fit within that specific retailer? And so if you are more of a premium brand and you are selling beauty products that begin at a price point of $39.99 and up, then your product probably doesn't fit within a Walmart that is all about value and being lower price. On the flip side, if your product is something that is at a lower price point, then perhaps the Sephora is not the retailer that you need to be trying to position yourself with. So make sure that you understand the price points of the various retailers. What I see so many product brands do is try to pitch to every single retailer to get their product in wherever they can. And then it's a disconnect because their product either doesn't fit within that retailer, or they're discouraged because the buyer didn't accept their product, but it's because you as a brand founder didn't do your proper research on the price points of that particular retailer. Next, you want to think about, how is your brand going to stand out on shelf? So you are used to running your brand on .com. People can come to your website, they can scroll the pictures, they can read the product descriptions. But when someone is walking down the aisle, you only have a few seconds in which they want to make a purchase decision. So you need to think about your packaging. And I'm not saying as a founder, you need to come out the gate with premium packaging that is going to cost you an arm and a leg that you can't even get on shelves because you spent so much on packaging. However, you do need to think about, what are some ways that you can actually stand out? What are some things that you can add to your packaging that are going to educate the consumer, that's going to want to make them pick up the package, read more about you, read more about your brand, what you sell, what you offer, that's then going to drive them to adding that product to their cart. Last, you want to think about, how can you actually drive traffic to a retail store? So when you're going into mass retail, it is not solely on the buyers nor the company's marketing team to drive traffic to the stores to sell your product. This is why it's important to build your community so that you can already have loyal customers ready to go into stores, shop, and sell the shelves out, so that you can prove that your brand should be positioned in retail. You can prove that it does need to stay on shelves because people love to buy, shop, and support from you. So you need to think about, how are you going to drive traffic into stores? Some things you may want to think about is, how can we drive in-store activations? What are some pop-ups that we can do with, local customers that love and support our brand, that are then going to go into that local retail store to shop? How can you get out in front of some of your customers in these retail stores? Can you use geo-targeted ads to drive traffic to a particular retail store? So you want to start just thinking about, how if I were to get my brand into the number one retailer on my list, how am I going to drive my customers off of my website to get them to go into the store to purchase?